welcome back to What the Fat. Today is someone that I've been dying to have on the podcast for way too long. Someone that's literally local, that lives here. And we've basically done like a podcast before the podcast because we've been just catching up for so long.
Yeah, we did.
But I'm super honored because you've been such a huge influence for me and just such a huge influence for so many people in the keto world to have you on to talk through. We have a whole bunch of different things that we're going to be talking about. But today with me I have Danny Vega. So welcome to the show, man.
Dude, I could say the same thing about you, man. You've been a big influence, ever since back in the day when we met. And then, of course, the science stuff is awesome, but it's the other stuff that I really appreciate from that whole make positivity louder thing. All of that stuff is just, that's like catnip for me, man. I love that stuff. So I'm just happy to be here.
Oh, man. Well, that makes me feel great. I appreciate that. And so we met back when you were doing a different thing than you're doing now, and I want to jump into a transition that you made in your career life, which I know is challenging, right? It's like jumping out of the plane and figuring out how to build a parachute on the way down. It's like, oh,
that's the best way to describe it.
It's a thrill, man. It's a thrill. But you came in and I think we had talked when I was on the podcast for the Keto Evangelist, Jacob and I.
Yep.
And we were doing some of that stuff, and I was like, damn, this guy is more jacked than I'll ever be in my entire life, and he's doing keto, so it must be the right way. So can you just tell people, if they don't know you, they must be living under a rock, because you're all over social. You and the entire family are all over social, and I love it. But just tell a little bit about like your background, growing up, and then transitioning. Obviously, you've been into fitness, health, wellness, and then kind of transitioning into keto. Like, how's that transformation been?
Yeah, man. I've always been into fitness. I've always been into nutrition, all of that stuff. But I there were periods of my life when I did low carb. I never knew what keto was. Even in grad school, I got my master's at UF. I played football at Columbia University. And I got my master's in applied physiology, and the nutrition stuff, everything that I covered, there was no talk of keto, which is kind of weird. And when I was a powerlifter in 2013, Mark Bell started this war on carbs thing, and I thought that was absurd. I thought it was so weird. I was like, what is that? Powerlifters need carbs, And as time went on, I got stronger and my body wore down more. And I actually just saw a picture yesterday of myself 4 years ago where I look older. Like, no question about it. I don't have that transformation story where it's like I lost all this weight, but I definitely, because after 3 or 4 months of keto, I looked the same as I did before. So what ended up was a catalyst. It was 2016. I had to pull out of a powerlifting meet in March, and because I had a torn meniscus. So I said, what should I do? I tried to get healthy, so I lost some weight. So I leaned out. I was like, at the time, like 235, and I got down to like 220. And I was doing like a typical bodybuilder type of leaning out. So starting off with my carbs at like 400, but my fat was always low. So I started with my fat at 70 and brought it down to 50. By the end, that was like in March. By the end of May, Memorial Day weekend, my wife was doing it with me, Mauro was doing it with me, and we had binged like 3 weekends in a row because we got a cheat day, but it would be a cheat weekend. And then Trevor was always in the gym, mutual friend of ours, like saying, hey, do keto, do keto. I'm like, what the heck is this guy talking
what is
about?
This thing?
And so finally, like I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do low carb. After that weekend, I was like, let me see if I could do low carb. And then I was like, well, if I'm gonna do it, I might as well do keto. So for me, the transition was so easy because all I did was bring the fat up. So my carbs were already under 100, So basically within 2 days, I felt totally different. The inflammation was down. I started to notice that I had more energy. I was less hungry. So if I had to like identify the 3 things, it would be that, lowered inflammation, more energy, my brain was working better, and control over my hunger, And what that led to, because that was in June of 2016, that whole second half of the year when I was still in my old life, when I was still a medical device rep, that translated into like a 15 to 20%, if I had to quantify it, increase in productivity. And that's where at the end of that year, I won the Pinnacle Award, which is like the sales award, and then I wanted a trip for me and Maura, and it was amazing, you know. And then, of course, 2 months in, Trevor, by the way, he was working under Jacob at UT.
Yep.
And I was like, hey, send me every single like research paper you have. So he sent me 41 papers. And I was like, I read all of those papers. Then I read, you know, Jimmy Moore's books. Then I read, of course, when I got to the art and science of low carb performance, that was a game changer.
Bollock and Finney, yeah.
Oh, yeah, man. And I was just like, this is amazing. And so I was listening to Brian on Keto Evangelist, and then I reached out to him in August, and that was like 2 months later. I said, hey, if you ever want to do anything with athletes, let me know. I didn't even know what it was. I was like, maybe an interview. And he's like, well, I'm actually starting an athlete podcast. Would you like to be my first interview? So we get that interview, and then like we hit it off, and we talk on the phone like for like an hour after. And he's like, I need a co-host. Would you like to be my co-host? So I was like, that sounds awesome, but let me talk to my wife.
Yeah.
So I talked to her, and then like here we are 2 years later, you know, career change, and I never thought that I would make this my career, but more and more as I got more involved and helped more people, I was like, this is my calling, you know. So here I am now.
I love it, man. I love it. And your story is so unique because a lot of people come in and like you see like Suzanne Ryan and Leanne, and they have amazing transformation stories, and like they're super incredible. Jimmy Moore, like you mentioned, but you're coming in from a perspective of like you are a power lifter. You want to drop some weight and ultimately just feel better. And you really just were like, all right, here's some resources. Luckily, Trevor, who's a great friend of ours, was just like he was die hard, still is to this day on keto, and I was like, he was one of our subjects in the study, and he was like just standing out above everyone else and just crushing it. But I didn't know that. That's cool. That
dude, I got to tell you something. I have an email to one of the research assistants back around that same time period. I was like, hey, if you guys ever need subjects, let me know.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome, man. That's a small world, man.
Yep.
Small world. That's awesome. And I think what you've done thus far is like your entire journey has been incredible, and I think you're just really even getting started to really hit that pinnacle of like where you can go and what your potential is. And so one of the things I want to talk about before we talk about like getting into keto, you mentioned it, but I think it's something that this podcast, What the Fat, isn't just to talk about keto. I think it's about whole life experiences, right? You talked about like the Make Positivity Louder. I'm all for it, and I know you are as well. You made a huge transition recently. You went from a very comfortable job where you were like, hey, this is what I'm doing on a daily basis. You were eating Fresh Kitchen like it was going out of style. I love it. It's a mutual love of both of ours. It's a phenomenal place. I don't know if they have them other than like Tampa or Florida, but it's just like it's like a healthier version of like Chipotle.
Yeah, 100%.
But they cook everything in coconut oil, amazing. But every time I was like, damn, Danny's eating this damn Fresh Kitchen all the time. But you were a sales rep, a medical sales rep. Can you talk a little bit about what you did and really what inspired you to say, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm going to go on to the next level of my life, and this is what I want to do.
Yeah, dude, there was a lot of things that happened, you know, and everybody tells me, why do you have all these accounts? And that it's just an example of how I didn't think this out. This just happened, and I just responded to it. So so I didn't set out to be who I am today. But I was doing very well at my old company. I've been in OBGYN for like 11 years, so medical device sales, like in every single procedure you can think of with the female pelvis, I was in it, you know? And it was a really good living. I made my own schedule and everything. And then there was a few things. I had some culture changes at work that were making me question like what I was doing. And then my company also bought Monsanto, which I was like, oh, that's kind of not in line with what I'm doing, you know? And so then I set out at the end of last June, so right around last July, I was like, I need to get out. And so that's when I really started to say, you know what, this can be a thing that I do, you know? Is it going to be hard? Yeah, I'm, you know, make a lot of money, do very well. But I just started to build myself, and there's several things that happen. You know, I never said no to a podcast interview because I can always talk about the things I love. Just anytime anyone asks for anything, just give. That's one of the biggest things that's important to me. You know, don't be afraid of you know, giving of yourself, helping people, answering questions, giving away free stuff. And that whole year, all we did was like, I was just getting Mauda ready. You know, I was like, this is gonna happen, man. I'm gonna leave. And so the timing seemed to be the right time for me to just rip off the Band-Aid. I wasn't ready. I remember a lot of people say, hey, it's great that you got to the point where you can quit. And I was like, well, not really, you know? But I think that's the only way you can do it, man, because then you're never going to be fully immersed. And I'm so grateful for it, because every single day I spend my days doing what I want to do. You know, that's a beautiful thing. So here I am now. We have our blog, we have the Ketogenic Athlete podcast, but now we have Fat Fueled Family. And that to me is like, in the long run, I would love to be associated with leading a movement to get families healthier. You know, not just in a way that's like, this is how you eat. You know, we have to approach, there's a psychology to it too, you know, with your kids. Like, how are you going to transition your kids? Right. You know, so there's all the aspects of like, what is important to me and where can I uniquely solve certain problems. And I know I can do it with fitness. I know I can do it with nutrition, mindset, and just helping families connect better. You know, some of the feedback we get sometimes is like, it's not just what you say, it's just hearing you interact with your wife. That's like, it's those little things in between that you don't notice, you take for granted. So that's what I'm trying to do, man. And, you know, it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, people want to get jacked. They want a six-pack. You know, they want to get stronger. They want to look better, and they want to know how to eat the right food or make more money. And I'm over here like, well, you got to do this stuff over here. So let's start with here, get jacked. But once I got you reeled in, I'm gonna try to make you a better person. You know. Right. So that's kind of like that's my dirty secret.
I love it, man. I love it, and I'm excited to jump into the family component because it's something I follow and aspired, and I look up to it honestly with you and your wife and how you guys interact with your kids. Like, I'm just a huge fan of it all because I hope that one day I can have a family like that. So so you guys are a huge inspiration for me, but. Going to that, I think it's really, really important to understand, because I talk about like our transition. Jacob and I made a transition from academia into, we created the Applied Science and Performance Institute. But similar to you, like a lot of times people think I have to be at rock bottom. Sometimes people need to be at rock bottom in order to make a change. But you're at like the pinnacle of your quote unquote career, and it was like you crushed the sales award. You got a trip with you and your wife to go out and have fun because you crushed it that year. And then at that moment, you're like, yep, it's time to make a change. Like most people would be like, they find this level of complacency and they're complacent, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I don't want to be complacent. I want to take it to the next level. I want to be on my own terms. So I think that's so unique within itself. And Jacob and I were at the same level. Like we were having the best year ever at the University of Tampa, and we said, you know what? If you don't rip off the Band-Aid now, I don't want to get trapped, because you see it all the time. People get complacent and they're like, oh, this is comfortable, right? And then you get trapped in that, and then 40 years go by and you're like, what the heck just happened? Like I wish I would have done that. Or you live with all this regret down the road, and you said, you know what? Even though I'm at my pinnacle, like let me rip this Band-Aid off and go after what I truly want to do. So I think that's super admirable to do, and I know it's not easy, and I know it's challenging, and you're battling through that now, but net, you and I were talking earlier, like the long game, long term, it's ultimately going to make the world of a difference.
Dude, and for you to me, like there was no choice but to do what you did, because I remember you guys telling me like, there's this problem, there's literature, and then there's the general public, and they're not seeing the literature, they're not seeing the science. And so you guys were like, well, we need to interpret that, we need to get that. But then if you're actually stuck somewhere, you're not as effective. So it comes to a point where you have to choose to leave and be on your own so that you're free to really do the thing that you want to do, you know? So that's the same thing with me. Like I was like, you know, I can continue to be comfortable in my job, but then there's no way that I can have the experiences. Like within 2 weeks of quitting, Ben and I were doing seminars in Miami. We were going to see Jordan Peterson live. We were doing all these things, and I'm like, this would never have happened, you know? And so now here I am, like, who knows what's going to happen in 2 months? Who knows what's going to happen in 4 months? It's kind of a beautiful thing, you know? So no, I love it, man. If I can advise anybody who's in that position, especially if they're young and they don't have kids and they don't have a mortgage,
right.
Do it now, man. Do it now. Don't wait for it. Because there's been times in my life where I've been like, you know, I should do this, and then someone else did it. And then I was like, dang, that could have been me, man. You know, so I learned from it all. But yeah, I don't doubt that I'm in the right place. I'm exactly where I need to be, you know?
Amazing. I completely agree, man. And so I want to transition into talking a little bit more about like your keto life, like a day in the life of the man, the myth, the legend. Yep. So there's a lot that we're gonna dive into here with keto, because a lot of times, first and foremost, I think people often forget about like, oh, there's a ketogenic diet, and then we always talk about like a well-formulated ketogenic diet. Like, cool, I could technically eat just purely bacon, or I could drink butter, and that's the only thing I...
have a few slices of toast.
Yeah, like, and I'm still keto. Like, but it's not a if I eat a slice of bread, and that's all I had every single day, technically I could make the argument I'm on a ketogenic diet. Is it a well-formulated ketogenic diet? No.
Exactly.
No, because I'm going to be in a state of ketosis, but it's not well-formulated. So can you talk a little bit about like a day now, currently, like what's a day in the life look like for you?
Well, nowadays versus before, I eat a lot more protein, you know, and I'm just a lot more comfortable with protein. And it's just because like back then, I think what happens is a lot of people, we remember that, you know, 1920s when keto was being used, it was therapeutic, you know. So you have to have all these control for all these different variables, and there's less flexibility, and there's awesome well-formulated ketogenic diets that are being used now to treat certain things that wouldn't apply to me, you know. How am I going to strike the balance between keeping my muscle on and having enough energy, you know, so the fat can't be too high, because then my body comp suffers. The protein can't be too low, because my body comp suffers. So there's all that difference. So back then I was, you know, 80+% fat, and you know, now, you know, my fat's maybe 65, 70%, and I feel better. But a typical day is, you know, I don't on purpose fast or intermittent fast, but it always ends up being anywhere from 14 to 16 hours. And then breakfast, another thing is I used to have coffee with a ton of fat in it. Now I'll do coffee with a little bit of unsweetened cashew milk and adaptogenic mushrooms. Huge fan, especially lion's mane. Some of the research is amazing, showing like lion's mane can help these people, like neurogenesis, like can trigger neurogenesis.
Yeah, so huge fan of it.
Yeah, so there's that, and then maybe MCT oil, maybe not, but much lower fat. And then I'll typically either do yoga and then train, because Ben and I are like, we don't care about like being at our strongest. It's more like lifting weights after doing yoga becomes like a mental challenge too, you know, because you're beat. And then I'll have my first meal anywhere from 10:30 to 12 p.m. Today I had this is one of my favorite meals, by the way, ground beef, sauteed cabbage, guacamole, which is like these organic little pods that you get from Costco, like 2-ounce pods of all it is avocado and seasoning. And then some bacon crumbles and some yogurt cheese, like all mashed up in a bowl. Right, either that or like steak. That's what I really love.
What's the name of this bowl?
Keto Muscle Bowl.
That is Keto Muscle Bowl. I saw Rachel posted something about this, and she's like, I'm eating it. I was like, I got to get on that plan. I got to eat that Keto Muscle Bowl.
It's usually any type of ruminant, like ground beef, like a ground lamb, ground beef with like maybe avocado. I just find that if just one avocado a day helps me so much, because one of the things I'm interested, and you know, obviously we need to talk about this another time, but it's the interplay between the different electrolytes. So like the salt versus potassium balance, because everybody's salting their food, but what's happening if they're not getting enough potassium? What's happening, you know?
You need it. Absolutely need it. You need that balance for sure.
So I'd love to salt my food. So now if I get enough potassium, I also have a few SNPs that everybody's like, oh, you have good genetics. Well, not according to 23andMe, okay? I have a lot of SNPs that obviously epigenetics, it shows, because all of these things are not manifesting themselves because of my lifestyle. But you know, I'll have that first meal, and then I'll have another meal tonight. And I used to have my second meal like around 5 or 6, but now that the boys are both in jiu-jitsu, I'll have like half the meal at 4, and then when I come back, half the meal at 7. That way I don't have to freaking cook at 7 o'clock at night, because I'm the cook in the house. So so that's kind of the typical day in my life.
I love it, man. I love it. So basically you're typically 2 to 3 meals per day, some sort of intermittent fasting.
Yeah, and you know, there was carnivore times, and I love carnivore. I gravitate towards it because I love it. But you know, I also can tolerate a few foods. It's not a big list that I can tolerate a lot of foods, but there's a small list that I like to do. Like I like some blueberries, I like some you know, cabbage, and I like some sauerkraut. Anything fermented is like I love, you know. And then what's the one I'm missing?
Avocado.
Avocado. How could I forget poor avocado? That's my favorite
I wish
thing.
you could see. I love this because this is one of the biggest topics I want to jump into, because anytime, like I feel like every podcast or every conference I've been at, like at least some person comes up and asks me about carnivore, and the two people I'd be like, it's Sean Baker and Danny Vega. Like, go check them out. They're the experts on it. But I love that you bring this concept up, because this was ultimately my default answer, because I said, listen, we don't know a lot of the I think it's a great tool. I really think it's a perfect elimination
that's
protocol.
How I'm seeing it now.
But now, like, looking at, like, I can't, it's such a, I've done it, but like I'm like looking and I'm like, where's
beginning of this year, right?
Yeah, I was like, where's the avocado? Like, I was like getting the itch for avocados, and I was like, it could have been an electrolyte thing. Like, maybe I needed to really bump up my electrolytes a lot more, but it's just easier for me. Like, I love avocados and enjoy them and don't have problems eating them. So what is your kind of, you kind of have gone from like pure hardcore carnivore to, like, now you said incorporating in some stuff. What have you been seeing? I know your wife does as well. Like, I know she's seen incredible results. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Mauda's a perfect example of like that person that may benefit from working with someone closely, like in a clinical setting, to identify everything completely. But then at the same time, carnivore's cheap, you know.
Right.
Like she found that she felt better. She was adding salads back in because this was before she turned carnivore, last July, August, because we started in August of last year.
Wow.
So it's been over a year now.
Wow, yeah.
And so she was waking up in the middle of the night to vomit from a few different nights. Now we know that she has an aversion to lettuce, which we didn't know because we did an MRT food sensitivity panel.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. But a lot of things, she immediately feels things. So of course, keto's amazing because you're so sensitive to anything that your body can't tolerate. It's amazing. So so immediately, if she has onions, headache, or there's things that manifest themselves in different ways. That being said, a lot of people can't do that, so they end up doing that elimination diet, basically what they're doing with carnivore, and they find all of these symptoms get better. We don't know the mechanisms by which they're happening, and then, you know, there are things that they're even like, they're more theoretical. They're more theoretical. So wait, what about this? What about that? And a lot of mechanistic explanations for why carnivore probably wouldn't work, but I haven't seen any literature to suggest one way or the other. Right. So there's things that I worry about, like, let's look at our IGF-1 levels. What's happening over time? Like, now we see that if IGF-1 is slightly elevated, probably no difference in risk. If it's super elevated, that's when you start to see the risk. Right. What happens to uric acid? What happens to all these things that could possibly, you know, go awry? And we don't have the answers, but supplementation is one way to take care of these things, like, you know, taking the right B vitamins, taking all these things. But then at the same time, also, I like variety, you know, and I don't think we should divide ourselves into these camps like this. It's so absurd to me, you know, like when I post a picture of cabbage and someone's like, you're not carnivore anymore. Right. And I was like, well, I don't even know how to answer that, you know, like, is this carnivore? I'm like, you could call it whatever you want. It's my breakfast, you know, like
it's breakfast.
Yeah. And like, and so, and like, even with, when you look at like Nina Teicholz, and she's talking about the importance of meat and the importance of protein, we should all be saying, hey, that's true. Let's focus on protein, which we to this day say. There are people that may, for some reason, not handle other stuff, but there's people like me who, from a sustainability standpoint and just enjoying my life, I can eat other things and I'm just okay. And if that's gonna offend people, it's weird if it does.
Yeah, it's weird.
But hey, I mean, whatever.
I completely agree, brother, and I love hearing that because I'm the same exact way. Even after doing that, like, I was the pickiest eater growing up. Like, poor mom and dad, like, absolute worst. But they had to force me to even touch a vegetable. I don't think I touched broccoli till I was like 20 years old. So it was tough. But like I was forcing, and I thought I needed to do that. Like I thought I needed to force it in. But now I'm at a point where like I'll eat like a steak with like vegetables on the side, or like occasionally I love Cobb salads. Like,
you love your Cobb salads.
Into Cobb salad. But it's just like, so to me, I love that. I enjoy it, but it's not like I'm forcing it. And the other thing that you mentioned is, which I talk about every single time someone asks me about this, is I hate the concept of let's create camps internally. Because one of the things I talk about often is, you look at Atkins, right? Atkins boomed and did extremely well, but it ultimately fell. It came down, and then we hit another phase of like people's health plummeted.
Yeah.
But it had a lot of potential, and one of the reasons is Atkins came out, and then people started internally bickering, like, well, no, you need more protein, you need to do this, like, you're doing it wrong. And then what happened? Atkins came out with these awful bars with sorbitol, maltitol, all these different things, and then people were doing it. They weren't really in ketosis. They felt like crap, and then it just disrupted it. And I was like, this movement, when we're talking about the ketogenic lifestyle, has so much potential. I don't even think we're close to figuring out all of the possibilities, like longevity, all these different aspects. Performance, all these different things. The thing that will destroy it from being how amazing and popular, and Halle Berry's talking about it, like so many different, all these people, the thing that will destroy it is internally groups battling each other. Like when the carnivores go after the vegans and start like, even though they're keto and vegans going after carnivores, it's like, listen, like if you choose that way, the way I look at it is like, you choose that way, cool. I eat meat, like I do it. Like if you're doing it for some type of religious reason or something else, that's fine. Just understand the limitations of it. Like just understand you need to get in way more protein. You need to supplement more than anyone else. If you're not doing it, your diet's deficient, period. Like no doubt about it. If you're gonna go carnivore, that's great, like cool, but you don't need to like be like, like eating broccoli is the worst thing in the world for everyone in the world because broccoli's terrible. Like it's a devil. It's like, let's find a balance. And like I tend to be more like, okay, cool, I eat more carnivore, incorporate in plant or like Cobb salads, vegetables, like whenever I want to, but fermented foods like kimchi. I like kimchi.
It's the best,
amazing. But things like that's what I think will ultimately destroy keto, is if people allow that conversation to battle internally. Because then what happens is, even though there's like this person on this end, this person on this end, the people that you forget about are in the middle that ultimately go, they're looking to the right, they're hearing all you got to eat is meat, everything else sucks. People on the left that go, all you got to eat is plants, meat kills you. And it's like,
we have two camps that are saying the complete opposite.
And the person in the middle is looking left and right and gets confused, and then they go, screw y'all, I'm going back to the cereal because I don't know what the hell to do.
And I don't got time for this.
That's what I love. Like your approach is like, listen, there's a place for all of us to live. Like it's okay. We're talking about optimizing health and optimizing the outcome of living a better life. Stop bickering and battling each other. Like just there's peace within it all.
And like even within keto, not even carnivore, there's people that are getting angry or telling people that that's not keto when they're eating carrots or apples, and I'm just like, guys, it's an organic apple. I mean, like I'm never gonna tell my son don't eat an apple, eat 5. I don't care, you know. And so that's a problem. And the other thing is, it's so easy with the algorithms and everything that you're consuming becomes an echo chamber. Like I saw that Rhonda Patrick with Joe Rogan, and there was a lot of times I was cracking up, you know, like he's talking about carnivore Carl, and you know, like and like I'm one of those people that I love meat and I talk about it all the time. I even, when I have to take over certain people's Instagrams, they're like, hey, if you don't mind, add some plants to your plate if you're, you know, or don't take pictures, because we have vegan people that are customers that rely on us for supplements or something. And so it's at the end, if you believe in it completely and that's you, be you no matter what. But like in my opinion, for me, you know, I'm just saying for me, I'm not even telling anybody else. I'm saying that I love my cabbage and I love, and it's not all the time, you know. There's the other thing is like over a long period of time, deficiencies don't show up as quickly if you're every now and then having this or that. You know, because it's not every single day. You know, if I have my liver 2 or 3 times a week, that's good enough. Jeez, thank God that's good enough.
Every
time I gotta mix it with bacon or some sort of seasoning that's really banging because I'm just like, I have 14 pounds of liver because I make these hasty decisions where I'm like, oh, grass-fed liver was on sale for like $4 a pound, and I got 18 pounds, and so now I got 14 pounds left to get through. So.
Oh man, that's awesome. It's a superfood. It's awesome. It's great. Yeah. But yeah, I love it, and I think there's people like yourself. I know Sean's like that as well. Like he brings people in and is like, he has a whole like recovery group of these people that have seen amazing, and that's like, even I haven't even jumped in that, but that's even powerful within itself.
It is, man.
These people that were like
homeless. You don't have a support system and that you used to have.
They were like sick and they weren't seeing results. But then there's people like a good friend of mine, Dr. Will Cole. Will Cole.
He's doing good things.
He's amazing. So with vegetables, he's talking about, but like I had him on the podcast and he's like, no, I don't hate meat. Like I'm not against it. Like, and so
I think people want to categorize things easily. That we want to categorize things. And so if you're not a carnivore and you're not a vegan, then what are you?
Right.
Because I need to know where to put you. You know?
I need to stick you in this bucket.
Yeah.
It's like okay, I'm in the everyone loves everyone bucket.
Yeah.
We can all coexist.
Yeah. If we sit down and eat and I see food on your plate that I don't eat, I promise that I'm not going to get mad.
I won't try and steal it from you. It'll be okay. Oh man, I love that. I think that'll truly help a lot of people, even just hearing that.
I hope so. Even with the kids, like not worrying so much about being in ketosis when you're eating the right foods. You know, my boys are, when they really got like strict with it and it was their decision, it was all their decision, and they grew like crazy. But I'm not here counting their carbs or anything like that. If they have some yams, they have some sweet potatoes, at the end of the day, it's real food. You know, that's what we should be focusing on. Food quality, that's super important, you know, because we were talking about this before. If you got like all these sweeteners in your diet, you know, what are the possible things that can happen? Because there are some issues that arise. You know, there's some gut issues, there's some possible neurological issues with some of them. So, you know, don't be afraid of adding like maybe a tablespoon of honey to a recipe that adds one more carb per serving, you know, and it's sugar, yes, but it's actually natural. It's not something that someone in a lab coat had to make, you know. I don't know, that's just how we see it now.
I love it, man. I'm excited to dive into that because I think yours and Mata's approach to going into the family atmosphere is just amazing.
Thanks, man.
But before we go into that, one of the things I want to talk, you've been seeing the keto space for a long time. What in particular excites you about where the keto space is at and where it's going? Like, is there anything that you're like, I'm super excited to see this going on?
Yeah, there's a few things, man. There's, first of all, the esters are, for me, like, I don't see what their application is to performance, but ketone esters for like cognitive performance, dude, when I take that, I'm just like, I can do anything. I feel like what's that movie with the pill?
Oh yes,
Limitless or
yes, Limitless.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's amazing. It's short-lived. It's maybe like 2 or 3 hours, but it's powerful. So that would be something that once these companies that are starting to actually market the esters to the public, once we can get the price point down a little bit, I think that's
palatable and a little bit more palatable. You and I can throw them down, but like I've given one to my mom and she almost slapped me after.
Dude,
she's
there's like 5 waves of aftertaste. Like you get hit like boom, no, it's not over.
What is that?
So that's one of the things I really like. And I'd love to, there's a language barrier with this, but I don't know if you know the people in Hungary, Paleomedicina, they have this Paleolithic ketogenic diet that is mostly, their big focus is intestinal permeability. So what are the possible things on a ketogenic diet even that could, you know, adversely affect or increase intestinal permeability? And so they do like no dairy, and they do kind of like a carnivore approach, but they do like a 1 to 2 protein to fat ratio. So, and the other thing is they don't do dairy because of some possible link to I think kidney stones with dairy, if you're prone to kidney stones, and the other one would be like tumor growth and tumor, you know, growth factors possibly being increased. And then they have a strict list of things that they don't do, but they'll say like, hey, if you're gonna sweeten something, use honey, or if you're gonna have carbohydrates, maybe have like tubers. So don't have sweet potatoes and yams. And so I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Now, what could I do to that to make it cool for performance? Because 1 to 2, can't do that.
Right.
You know, for me, if I had to get my protein high enough, let's say my protein's at 200, now my fat is at 400. I'm sorry, man, that body comp is going to suffer. Or if I say, well, to accommodate for fat, if my protein is I have to bring my protein too low. So what could I do to make that more for performance? The only other thing is, I think there was one more thing. So I would love to see for performance shifting into paleo for some periods of the year. How would that affect performance? You know, we've talked about this before. Cyclic ketogenic, we have 2-day carb ups. We know those are disastrous, right? We don't have 1 meal carb ups. We don't have 1 day carb ups. So, you know, and I would like to see quality food, obviously, you know, focusing on something like, again, like a sweet potato, a yam. What happens there? You know, like, I'm just super curious. So I would love to see more of that. Those are the things that kind of drive me. Other than that, just increasing the movement and being, educating people more and having them think more about why they're doing what they're doing. Okay, this guy does intermittent fasting. This guy does that. Why are you doing it? You know, I would like people, that's one of my biggest things, get people to think, you know.
And I see you do that all the time, and I think you do it extremely well, because a lot of times people, as much as people want it, you're like, yeah, I know this is the easy route. I could spit it out and say, eat this, work out this way, do this. But you're like, I want to give you the tools so that way one day, this is the way we've always talked about. Like, I want to be able to give someone the tools so that way one day they go, I don't need you anymore.
Dude, that's what I do with my coaching clients. You know, like they'll ask me a question. I'm like, are you ready? Because I'm about to hit you with like, you know, because I want them eventually to be independent, you know, and think for themselves. Because then there was 1, now there's 3, now there's 7, now there's 8, now there's 2,500, you know, educated people, and then they're spreading, you know, the right message.
Yeah, it just goes from there. And one of the things you touched on, which was super interesting, is I heard about the Paleolithic ketogenic approach from a paper that was published on Crohn's disease.
Oh, it has to be. Yeah, they've published like 45 papers, and they're treating patients on all of those things. And these people are like, they're being told that there's nothing else we can do. And I guess, you know, most of them don't want to be on the immunosuppressants. They don't want to be on this other crap. So here's a thing, and here's how it works. You know?
And so I saw that, and that's really the approach that got my mom started on it. So we did a case study on her where we basically put her on like a Paleolithic ketogenic diet. And the thing about her is she was typically eating like 500 to 750 calories a day, just because she was so used to like. It was an ingrained, an automatic response of, hey, I eat this, I'm gonna have to go to the bathroom. So like she would nibble on like crackers, and she would like eat dinner with us. Even when we were growing up, we'd eat dinner and she'd eat like a little sliver, and I'm like, Mom, it would maybe be like 10 grams of protein.
She's trying to avoid the pain.
Trying to avoid it. Trying to avoid everything. And so I was like, you know what? Long story short, I made a decision several years ago. I said, you're going to be my science experiment. You're going to move down with me. She literally packed everything up for the summer because she used to work in the school system. So I was like, you got 3 months. I said, give me 3 months. And so brought her down for 3 months, had her live with me, and we put her on like a Paleolithic ketogenic diet, had her start walking 10 minutes per day in the morning, and she supplemented with exogenous ketones. And afterward, we looked at like CRP. And CRP is like a big marker of inflammation. So her baseline CRP was at 54. The range is from 0 to 4.9-ish.
Yeah, dude,
she was at 54. Crazy. So super inflamed. At the end, we got her down to 4.6.
Dude, that's awesome.
And so like she does that now. Like now she's like, I can't go. And she actually like, she was planning on going back. She stayed. So like she moved down for 3 months. Now she's here for life, and my dad moved down. But it's just, I love that approach because people, like you said, that are coming from a different standpoint of like, all right, cool, if you're coming from performance, you might be having a different approach than someone who's coming with autoimmune disease. And it's like she can't tolerate MCT oil or MCT powder. Like she'll be, but by the time it hits her tongue, she's in the bathroom.
Yeah, even coconut oil, I'm sure there will be some issues, you know, maybe.
Yeah, super difficult. So like you got to find that balance, but she's still on a ketogenic diet. She still does her morning walks and exogenous ketones and curcumin and fish oil and all these different things. So I love that you brought that up because that's a really important piece. One of the last things I want to talk about in this segment is you started training with a really good friend of mine. He's an I actually have to get him on the podcast. He's an incredible,
oh, dude, we'll get him on.
Yeah, incredible friend, but not only an incredible friend, a incredible human being. Like, and I've been fortunate enough. We worked with him back in Generation Iron, the original, OG Generation Iron, back when he was still in his bodybuilding days.
Yep.
Guy's an absolute animal and just had a different approach to training than anyone else that I've ever seen in my life. But it's the funny thing about it is I know we've been in touch with each other just so many years. But the minute I was like, I started seeing you on like Instagram. It's like, oh, I'm training at MI40, and like the next thing I know, like you went from like one level to like level 100, and I was like, damn, Ben, whatever Ben Pakulski's doing is legit. And like just being around that guy, I feel like you grow. Like it's mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. So can you talk a little bit about like what it's been like to train with someone at that level?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm a little bit extra blessed because I found myself, the 3 training partners were me, Ben, and Derek, who was getting ready for the Olympia. So basically, Ben and I were getting ready for the Olympia, Gosh. So like, this guy places second in the Olympia in the 212 weight class, that it's a beautiful looking physique, the 212 physique is nice looking, So Ben and I, Ben originally reached out to me last year and was like, hey man, I see you doing things in the ketogenic space. I'm like, I think you're a leader. I think you're a good leader. Come to the gym, check it out. I was like, cool. Because back in the day, Joe Bennett, who used to be at MI40, he and I worked at UF together in grad school. Like, he was a personal trainer under me. I was a head personal trainer over there. And Joe said, hey, this MI40 thing's opening, and you should come. And I never came, back when they opened. I just was powerlifting. I didn't have the time. And then when Ben asked me, I said, okay, let me go. And when I first went there, every time I went, he wasn't there. And then finally, I don't know what happened. We saw each other one day, and then he texted me that night like, hey, we're training legs tomorrow. Come. And I couldn't go that next day. So I said, no, I can't. And then the day after that, he texted me again. And then I was like, I'm never saying no again. Yeah. So I just found myself training there. And then Ben and I became pretty much like best friends, like we were at dinner at his house on Sunday. Our families are always together. So there's 2 parts of it. There's, of course, the fact that, he has simplified things, and he's doing things where people are over here saying, what exercises can I do to grow muscle? And he's like, back it up. Well, let's look at the skill acquisition of doing the right exercises. Not if something's not working, maybe it's not the exercise, maybe it's your execution. So I learned so much from that. So it was like, we're training for contraction, not completion. We're not just going through and looking at my old training videos. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. All wrong. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a great workout, man. Great metabolic workout, but that's not the maximal contraction. So when I was learning, the main thing was that I learned, I think, was learning how to get the best contraction in every single length of the muscle. So people always contract, and when they're in the shortened position, of course, that's like you can feel that squeeze. But how do you contract when you're in the lengthened position? That was like, oh my gosh, now my upper chest is growing. Now I'm actually growing in certain areas where I didn't grow before. Right. And of course, I was like, okay, if I'm gonna do this, then I'm just gonna eat more, and I ate more. And I got up to like 235, and then after the accident that happened in August, then I got a little fat because I was just like, I would overeat at night, I was stress eat. But before that, and now I'm back to like 225 because I'm just this month trying to get as lean as possible because I'm starting jiu-jitsu in December. So
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And so Ben has been an amazing resource and friend, and he's an amazing human being, man. He's just one of the most impressive people that I've ever met. Like, he's just so mindful, so caring, so giving, and he's been an amazing influence on me, man. So speaking to that a little bit, like doing the jiu-jitsu is probably a little bit of Ben and I are so on the same wavelength on so many things, and my life now is about how can I challenge myself and do things that are out of my comfort zone. Jiu-jitsu is not my comfort zone, but my boys are doing it. I paid for a year ahead of time, so they're in, and now I'm gonna join them. So it's amazing to learn from someone like that, because it's not just, of course, in my opinion, he'll tell you, oh, so-and-so's the biggest expert in the world on this. I'm like, Ben, that's you. That's not him. You're the guy, But then at the same time, he has a lot more to offer. And, that's where I would love for us to, all of us, have this movement of and we see the people that we look up to. That's what they're doing. You know, we're not just focusing on this. We're focusing on becoming a better human, being more mindful, and all those other things. All of a sudden, your abs are showing more. You know, it translates into everything.
Huge. And I love that. I love seeing two great friends come together and just being an ultimate powerhouse. And not only physically, like your transformation physically has been ridiculous, but that guy, like Ben's just at a whole nother level mentally and what he's able to do. And people look at it, it was funny, like when we used to walk around with him, people would be like super intimidated, kind of like the Hulk, you know how deep down they're like really nice and so he's a big guy.
He's not bodybuilding, but he's still walking around at 260,
he's
you know,
still a big dude. And now I'm like, damn. But like if people truly knew Ben for who he is, they'd be like, this is the biggest teddy bear in a good way of like like not like he's a pushover, but like he's gonna be there to be your biggest support system in the world. So it's huge to have someone like that in your corner. And I know you talk about that all the time. It's about the people you surround yourself with, the environment. Ultimately, like you said, like cool, I can train as hard as I want, I could eat the right things, but if I don't have the other aspects of my life, my social component of things, if I'm stressed as hell, I'm not sleeping, cool, my body composition's not going to be good, my health markers are and you're going to be like, but I'm training hard, but I'm eating right
too with the people around you. You some of those things, they manifest themselves without, it takes you the control away from you. It does.
It's huge, man, huge. And I think that's this whole kind of concept that we always talk about and preach. It's like, it's more than just training and nutrition. There's a lot more that goes into it to overall health. So with that being said, I want to segment into one of the things that I'm super excited about, because I learn a lot from you guys on social media. I learn a lot from everything you put out, and your family has been front and center of social media. It's like the fat fueled family. I freaking love it. I love the concept. So first and foremost, I want to jump into this is a big question we get all the time, is like, how did you come to feed, like, what do you feed them? What do you feed your kids? What do they eat? And kind of like, how did that interaction first start? Was it like, no, I want to eat cereal, and you're like, no, you got to eat meat? Like, how did that happen?
That is so good. That's a really good question, because that has in it, you know, some of the things that I think are super important. Of course, we always talk about this. The most important thing is to, you know, embody the behavior that you want from them. And, you know, you have to model that behavior, you know. So my children always saw us back in the day doing CrossFit or doing something. So when Dean first started walking, he got a broomstick, he put it on his back, he's squatting a broomstick, you know. That's just kind of what they see. They learn from what they see, not from what they're told. And Maura and I were paleo when we had Desmond, and so Desmond was paleo from a young age. We weaned him off of, when he started doing solid foods, which, you know, anywhere from 6 months on, he was grabbing for food at 4 months. So we were like, let's start we were giving him raw liver and raw grass-fed liver and soft-boiled egg yolks. And so this kid's brain was developing and all those things. And so all the way from nursing on, they're getting all these tastes, and all his palate is developing that way. But assuming that your child is not doing that, well, it kind of was like that for us, because then when we had Dean, we have that second child syndrome. You got a car full of kids, you go drive through, you like, eat the fries and shut up. Here, eat your fries, eat your toy, have your burger with the bun, and, you know. And so we started to backslide a little bit, and then it was kind of, it all came to a head last August. Again, the same weekend that Maura went with me on a trip to Puerto Rico, and she cut out vegetables, was the same weekend my kids were getting taken care of by my uncle and his wife. And they were eating crackers, they were eating cookies, and Desmond came back and had these terrible nosebleeds when we got back, because he has like allergies really bad, and I think wheat is probably the biggest one. And Dean had eczema really bad, and wheat, again, the biggest culprit. Maura's biggest red on MRT panel, and I'm convinced a lot of us, that would be red, is wheat. So Desmond, seeing how I do experiments, Maura said, hey, would you like to do an experiment? And he's like, all right, because he sees that I do experiments. So she's like, why don't you just eat meat for the next 2 days? You know, and that's how we said, this is how we're going to clean them up. And once they get into ketosis, the ketones will do the rest of the work. So sure enough, 2-3 days of just only meat, and then that's how they transitioned to keto. And dude, it was just within a month, they used to hate all these different things, and then I would offer them to them and they wouldn't like them, and then they started to like them, you know, so their palates change. But it's always offering foods, and then in time, if they don't like it now, offer it again, because their palate may change. And we notice that we resensitize their palates, because you know, you just can't compete with Doritos. You can't. Right. It's like all the food scientists, they're geniuses, and they're putting everything in there to make... It's a
science.
It is, you know? And so the number two thing, so besides modeling the behavior, is giving them the autonomy and putting them in a position of decision-making as much as possible. So everything, like, I remember Desmond would ask me, can I eat this? And I would say, it's your body. You put what you want into your body. It's very important. If you want to know why I wouldn't eat it, this is why. And so that's where you can't, you know, you just, first of all, if he says I want cereal, there's no cereal in my house. So if you want cereal, you're gonna have to go buy yourself some cereal. And that's where people go wrong in the first place. They're like, I have picky kids, you know, what am I gonna do? I was like, first, right now, before you stop talking to me, throw away everything that's bad. Donate it or whatever. Just get it out of the house, right? And that's when people are like, well, but they're not going to eat. You know, I'm like, well, they might not eat for a day or two, but our kids, you know, they're not going to go hungry. You know, look at what happened in the magic pill. These autistic kids were refusing to eat. A few days later, they gave in, and all of a sudden, then they started to see the benefits. We are in a constantly fed state. I think the average American eats like 11 meals a day, if you can include the frappuccinos and all the crap.
Snacks.
Yeah, and it's just a snacking epidemic. It's ridiculous, you know. They never, and Maura said this the other day, and I was like, wow, that's genius. All these kids are eating an unintentional, and their parents are unintentionally feeding them a vegan diet, because no one wants to eat their protein after they've eaten the starches and the sugar.
That's true.
They just don't. So it's like you're eating candy, you're eating, you know, sugar and all this stuff, and everything marketed to kids, like all the Dora the Explorer, you know, starches. There's no Dora the Explorer avocados or steaks,
right,
you know.
Right.
So it's kind of like, you know, we're at a disadvantage, but then at the same time, we as the parents can educate them and talk to them, you know? And so there's lots of conversations. Like my son blows my mind with his knowledge. I'm just like, dude, you can talk to anybody about this stuff, and you can run circles around people. You can teach others, you know? Sometimes I gotta be like, listen, if you're, because they go to Lifetime right here, Lifetime Fitness.
Oh, yeah.
And they have nutrition classes sometimes for the kids, because the kids program there is ridiculous. It's amazing.
Wow.
They call it Lifetime Academy. And they asked Desmond once, like, or they said, the whole class, they were like, name a healthy grain. And Desmond raises his hand and he's like, there is no such thing as a healthy grain. So I was like, okay, hilarious. Here's what you do, man. Just don't belittle other people. They're not even going to understand, first of all. And so, yeah, it's just having conversations, being open with them. Let them be kids, like people say, but let them be kids is not let them eat whatever they want every day. Let them be kids means on a birthday party, if they have cake, have some cake. They had some candy at Halloween. Did I buy some of them from them so I could throw them away? Yeah. They both made like $10, but they ate some candy, you know? And so, you know, of course, there's so many ketofied versions of things nowadays that for the most part, you know, you can find alternatives until Ali Miller's big on this. And this is why we love Ali so much, because they will resensitize their palate over time. You know, start to take away, when you do these recipes, take away these things that make them sweeter, and so they can channel that savory and that other stuff. And they do it, man. And now, you know, it's funny, the kids tend to eat a very carnivore type of diet because we eat all this meat. But then, like, this last week, Desmond's like, he's wanting asparagus, he's wanting Brussels sprouts, and it's like, you want your kids to eat vegetables? Well, don't make them eat vegetables, and you know. Right. But that's just Desmond. He's different, you know.
No, I love it, and I think your guys' approach is so intentional.
That's
like,
the thing.
It's super intentional. I think that's amazing, because a lot of times, like especially kids, I was one of these kids where it'd be like I was so actively involved in everything that like you have this unintentional eating, and the next thing I know, I'm a sleeve of Oreos down, and mom's like, "What the hell did you just do?"
I would put a bag of Chips Ahoy on my stomach in high school with a big old glass of milk, and I just would stop when I was done, and that was after dinner.
Every night, literally, it had to be the chewy chips.
For me, I like the chunky, because then I had to dip it in for like 5 seconds
to get it like the soggy.
To get it like the chewy.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. But I think we're starting to see a shift, and I think it's amazing because a lot of times, like you said, parents will cave in and they'll be like, oh, but they'll use inappropriate methods of being like, no, you have to do this. You guys are not only giving them autonomy, but you're teaching them in the process. You're saying, hey, you make the decision. Yep. Here's why I wouldn't. Mm-hmm. That is freaking amazing. I've never heard of people doing that before.
Well, and with parenting in general, we say, like a lot of people say, be careful or don't do that. And what we say, and we learned this from a friend of ours several years ago, is if you fall off of there, it's gonna hurt. And we keep saying those things over and over, because when they do fall and it hurts, then they trust us. So then they know, like, why are you telling me this? Because it's gonna hurt. And so when we have, like, Desmond went to a birthday party, it's like a year ago now, where he had pizza and cotton candy right off the bat. And I was like, oh, this is probably not gonna be good. Dude, he was doubled over, like crying, and he had the worst stomach ache literally within 30 minutes. And he's like, I wish I never ate it. And I said, look, use that, because we always say winners don't lose, they learn. And, use that as a learning experience, Next time you're presented with this, and now when he's presented with that, he's like, I don't want that pain, I don't want that,
Amazing, man.
So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's been incredible watching, like, I feel like I'm watching them grow up, and it's really cool to watch. There was something that I want to touch on last year, and I know it's a sensitive topic because it was something that, like, you put up on social media, and my heart was like instantly broken, and I was like, oh my gosh, because I don't even know what it's like to have kids. I feel like I do because Scooter's like my kid now, but I can't even imagine like how much like I see the love and affection that you guys give your kids. I can't even imagine that next level. But recently, can you talk a little bit about Dean? He was in an accident. What that was like, and like going through that experience, and how, like you said, you were stress eating. How did that play out?
First of all, Rachel was with me in the car when this happened. We were driving back. We spent the morning. I took her to yoga. I took her to Ben's to train, and then we were going to record a Fat-Fueled Family podcast with Rachel at home. Literally 5 blocks away from my house, Maura's calling me, screaming, "Where are you? Dean has been hit by a car." And she left the house, the front door open, wide open, went to the scene. Rachel had to go back later to close my doors and lock my doors. And by the way, Rachel stayed in my house, and she freaking cleaned my house. She's the best, man. I'm telling you, Rachel's just the best. So so I get there, and my son's not there. He's already been taken. I call 911, and 911's like, we've already been called. They've been dispatched. And it's just like, now my son's at the hospital, and when I get to the hospital, which 2 minutes away, all I see is, blood all over his face. He's crying, and it was the worst day of my life, and I lost it for like a minute. I had to leave the room. I cried uncontrollably, and finally I just was like, I gotta be strong. So I just went back in, and I talked him out, and I was like, I started praying with her, and she's like, his hair's falling out, his ear's torn off, his ear was torn off, and there's blood everywhere, and there's hair everywhere. We didn't know if his skull was broken and his brain was exposed. We didn't know any of these things. Right. And his eyes are rolling back in his head, and he still hasn't gotten any morphine or anything yet, so I'm like, what's going on? Yeah. But every step along the way, man, every single scan, no issues with the skull, no brain issues, no brain swelling, nothing with the spine, no internal organ issues. So that's over a period of 6 or 7 hours, the first 6 or 7 hours. Plus we had to take him to Johns Hopkins All Children's in St. Pete. Yeah. And so I had to ride with him. Thank God it was a stormy day, because they wanted to helicopter lift him, and I wouldn't have been able to go with him. So I went with him in the ambulance, and I was like, playing songs for him, and I'm just like looking at him, my boy, my beautiful boy, and he went through hell those first 2 days because he has really bad sensory processing disorder. So like all the tubes and changing everything, even taking the blood pressure, all those things. But the kid is just a freaking tank, man. He's a warrior, so strong, man. And like after 3 days, he took his first steps, and he was walking. And then by the time we got home, he's got a neck brace on because he's got torn ligaments in his cervical spine. He wants to jump off the couch. He wants to do all this. I'm like, Dean, you can't do that yet, Yeah. But that period after I took a few weeks off of work, and I was just with him the whole day. And there were times when it was just me and him, because Mara would take Desmond. We didn't want Desmond to suffer, so she would take him out of the house, you know. And Desmond went through trauma too, you know, seeing your brother get hit by a truck, literally hit and run over. Okay, and I saw the video several days later because my neighbor had the camera app, the Ring, which I have also, and I saw the whole thing, and I was just getting a little bit better, and that tore me apart. But the kid is a miracle. He's a walking miracle. We had thousands of people all over the world praying for us, and I believe in the power of prayer, you know. And so it was just a beautiful thing. And now we see him now, and this kid is nothing. You know, the team at St. Johns Hopkins was amazing, the surgeon. So in the end, I think that, like I said with this, you know, one of my tattoos is Amor Fati, you know, it's love your fate. You know, whatever happens to you is either good or necessary. So, you know, I believe that for some reason that happened for a reason. You know, I can guarantee you kids were holding their kids tighter. People were holding their kids tighter after that, you know. And now Dean, that period that I played with him, that extra attention that I gave him, like hours would pass by and I'd be like, 2 hours just passed by, holy crap. But he was happier, and he is happier now than he was before the accident, you know. So I got to look at it that way, you know.
It's amazing, man, amazing. And I remember watching it, and immediately I was like, I shot you a text, and I was like,
man.
Dude,
thank you, man.
Of course. And I was like, you know what, like this kid is an absolute warrior. Like I remember, well, you and Mata were posting videos and pictures, and I was like, this guy, man, he's
4 years old.
He's
man.
something special. He's something special.
And then all of our friends in the ketogenic space, you talk about that community, like sending us, you know, care packages like Butcher Box and all these, everybody, Real Good Foods, you know, they sent us all this food, and I was like, well, we don't really need this. And then when we got it, I was like, this is actually really helpful because I don't have to worry about one less thing to worry about while I'm going through this. So it was awesome, man.
It's amazing. And I saw they had was it a cheese that the boys
Bunker Hill.
Don't they have their own cheese?
Yeah, Bunker Hill freaking had they sent us several packages of the cheese crisps with Dean's, like a picture of Dean on the bag. We kept all the bags for the labels. Bunker Hill's a whole other story. They just made, when we went to visit them, because we were with them with the boys in Amish country last week, or 2 weeks ago, for a whole week, we got to see where the milk starts, you know, how it becomes cheese, their whole process, grass-fed, everything, just focus on quality the whole way. They gave us keto counterculture cheeses and Fat Fuel family cheeses.
Oh my gosh, that's so
it's like
cool,
special things like that. Again, coming back to like my life is more full now, man. It just is. I just, you know, those things, you can't quantify them, you know. I'm like, my experience is more full, and I'm with my family more, even if I may be working from home, but it's just a different thing, you know.
And one of the things I talk often about, like I have a band on, and I wear it all the time. It's going to be my next tattoo. It says be present now, or be here now. And it's all about being present, right? Yep. And I think one of the things that a lot of times people, and you don't even, like time goes by and you don't even really realize it or understand it, but you're like, what just happened? And like maybe those moments were like times where you're like, I need to be here now. Like I'm fully engaged in the moment with you, Dean. Like this is our time. Like that type of presence. That's the shit that matters at the end of the day. Like that's the stuff where it's like, all right, cool, you could be off doing this, making money, doing sales here, but you're like, I'm present in this moment. And so many people, it doesn't matter what you're doing, often overlook the power of like being present in the moment, and they just like are kind of halfway there, not fully there, and then like they don't realize the long-term impact, and then they go, wait, what just happened? And then they live with regret their entire life. And I'm like, so super, super powerful and super honored and appreciate you sharing that. One of the last things I want to ask you is, you come from a background of having so many different amazing attributes about you, right? You have incredible dad, family guy, husband, but absolutely, but also super influential, positive person, like always understands perspective. If you had to give one piece of advice to someone that's coming out, maybe that's just starting out in the keto world or non-keto world, that's like, you know what, this is a piece of advice from someone who's been there, who's done it, who's gone through the trials and tribulations, here's one thing I could offer you. If you wanted to like be like, this is the legacy that I leave, that people can ultimately be like, damn, I remember Danny Vega taught me that. What would that be?
All right. So the first thing is act now. Just do not waste any more time. People think they have so much time, man. We don't. Like Dean, look at what happened with Dean. I could have lost my son, you know? And so we can die at any time. We think we can't, because we live in this world where people don't just die like they used to. But so that's the first thing, act now. The other thing is to not be afraid to give. I think people hold on to things so much where they don't want to, like, for instance, like if you're a coach and you want to like do online coaching, give away some programs, man. Show people what you like. I wrote an article for Elite FTS like 12 years ago. It's called No Ideas Original. And it's basically this whole thing where we're all copying from each other, but like the way my take on it versus your take on it, people are going to get different things from each of us. Right. I could give you a program, you're still not going to get my coaching, you know. It's, you know, so be confident enough in yourself, and be confident enough that if you get yourself in front of enough people, that's a good thing, you know, whether you're giving them away. Like if you're selling a program, for instance, I'm thinking of it through my eyes, you know, it's too cost prohibitive. At the end, you make more per program, but what does it matter if 5 people bought it? You know, you want to create work that's long lasting, and I think a lot of people don't think about that. They don't think about, like, when you told me those things about me being a great dad and all those things, I'm like, if I had to have a eulogy written about me, that's what I want, you know. And so a good idea would be to write yourself a eulogy. See, what do you think people would say about you right now? Or what do you want them to say about you? Then start from there and say, okay, how do I create that? And it might take a long time. You and I were talking about this earlier. It's not easy to sacrifice some of these financial gains for the long game thinking, but then at the same time, you know, you look at something like a 5-3-1, you know, like that's Jim Wendler's program. He put that out forever. It's free now, but it's like 5-3-1. People know it, you know, 5x5, all those things. The only other thing is you got to learn every day. So you got to, like for me, I'm big on learning every day. So learn about the things that you're passionate about every single day. Don't stop. Don't ever think you're done. Listen to the people that disagree with you. Listen to all those other people, because you'll be better armed. And then you might actually agree with some of the things they say. And that's a powerful thing too, because if you were doing something and now you realize that wasn't quite right, you wouldn't have ever noticed that if you didn't try to learn from them. So yeah, and of course, like I said before, try to do it before you have kids and before you have a mortgage, because then it's like just a little bit better. You can afford to, like Robert and Crystal, you know, Keto Savage, they got that freaking van, you know, like they're gonna eventually travel the country in that big old van. That's freaking cool, man. I can't do that right now, you know. Right. So yeah, that's basically it.
I love it, man. There's so many steps and takeaways from not only this segment, but all of the segments that we've done. And ultimately, it's like, I tell people this all the time, like, stop contemplating, stop like debating it, like just take action. And ultimately, your main message is like, be a good human being. Like be a good fucking human being.
It's good business too, man. It's good business to be a good human being. Right, you know, it's not bad for business.
and on top of that, play the long game. Don't be afraid to sacrifice temporary satisfaction for long-term opportunity of, like, you know what? Some of the best relationships I have in my life now, like, you wouldn't believe, like, when I first started working with Jacob, like, I would like run there after practice, like sacrifice years before he was ever like, who the hell is this kid? But it's a long game. And I think you and I both see that. And I hope people listening to this understand, be a good human, think long, act now, right? I think Gary Vee says, macro patience, micro speed, right? Like, micro speed, like go now, do stuff now, but like understand that the shit you're going to do for the next 3 to 5 years, it might not pay off for 10.
Yeah.
And it's like, cool,
when you plant a seed, it still has to grow, you know, like it doesn't just sprout right away. It takes time, you know, so absolutely.
Love it, brother. So last thing is, where can people find you? Where are you? They can find you on social, the fam. Where can they follow the fam? Everything.
Yeah. So of course, Keto Counterculture on Facebook and Instagram. We got fatfuel.family. That's our website. The blog has the links to the podcast if they want to do that, or on iTunes. There's the Ketogenic Athlete. I'm on that, and that's pretty much it. I mean, like you said, I'm all over. So I'm posting all over. I'm always like, man, this is good. I got to share this with people, you know? So I don't have like scheduled posting. I just like, sometimes I'll do like 5 posts in a day. Sometimes I'll do 1, but it's all real. So
it's real.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, long term, like you being authentic and transparent is always going to win. And I know I got to tell the team, we got to get you to do, like, I would love for the fam to do a takeover on the Ketogenic.com Instagram.
Oh, let's do that, man. Absolutely.
I think that'd be cool, man.
I'd love that.
Well, brother, I can't tell you how much I appreciate. Like, there's so much value in this, man. Good. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, man. Anytime, bro.
You're, like I said, like, honestly, I mean this. You're a hero, a huge source of inspiration for not only me, our team, so many people in this community. So you, Mata, the kids, like, keep it up. Like, don't stop, because you're inspiring and helping so many people. So thank you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.